Welcome to the Great British Foreign Affairs Podcast, hosting insightful conversations with fascinating people to shape the way that Britain interacts with the world. So this is Notes from the Road in Kazakhstan, and this time it's actually notes from the train, isn't it, Lucia?
Yes, we are on a sleeper train from Almaty, Kazakhstan to Tashkent, Uzbekistan. We're going on a sleeper train, and the only problem is that we are arriving at 3 a.m, but we might get woken up early for the border.
It's an 18-hour train journey, isn't it? We're really enjoying it. For me, it's a reminder of the amazing time we had on the Trans-Siberian Express in 2016 when you were 1.5. So this time you're going to remember it.
Yeah.
We've been having a lot of fun, haven't we?
Yeah.
We've been very well looked after by the guard.
Yes, he's very nice.
And this is the end of our week in Kazakhstan, where we've been visiting Almaty, as you say, Lucia. What have we been doing in Almaty and the Almaty region?
We have been going to the mountain resort called SUITCASE, and it is very beautiful. And when you just arrive, it's just like breathtaking views. And we were staying in a tree house cabin, which was very cozy and beautiful and nice. We went horse riding and climbing and other things that were really fun. And I think I would totally recommend that if you're going to Kazakhstan in Almaty.
Exactly. Almaty is the cultural capital of Kazakhstan. Astana is the actual capital, which is the political and the business center. But Almaty is the place where the creatives, university, music, and
they say most people here say that music festivals are amazing. They're great.
Exactly. It's a really vibrant, amazing city. And just outside, 30 or 40 minutes drive outside of the city, starts Almaty region. Absolutely stunningly beautiful landscape. And where we went in the mountain resort was just incredible. Autumnal colours, alpine, layer upon layer of beautiful autumnal coloured trees. Yes. And then it rises up and up into snowy mountains in the background, doesn't it?
And then on the third day, when we woke up to snow. It was amazing. And the snow was just it was still falling. And
yeah, we were there for the first snow of the season, which was a big shock when we opened the curtains in our little cozy wooden cabin, which was so that was really fun, and we had a really fun time in the snow. We spent a whole set of just beautiful days hiking, horse riding, climbing. It rained, didn't it, one day, and we just spent the day in
children's centre, which had a really nice and it was like a playroom, and there were slides, and it was really fun. And I did a Canva project for my memories.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention about the yurt, because Kazakh culture, traditionally, Kazakh people were nomads and lived in yurts, and now that's part of their history and their heritage. Then
the yurt we went to for breakfast the first day, the biggest yurt in the world.
Yeah, in the Guinness Book of Records. And we also went to another mountain resort, didn't we?
Yes, Shumbulak, which is quite famous, I think. And we took a cable car through the mountains, and it was very beautiful.
Yeah, lots of people recommended it to us as somewhere that people go at the weekend. And we went up there. That's really high in the mountains with an incredible cable car. What we found was that because of the currency exchange, it was all really affordable, which meant we could do great activities and stay in this really amazing retreat place. And we then spent a couple of days in Almaty, didn't we? And we found Almaty to be such a vibrant city. Feels very familiar for Western tourists, similar climate to Britain.
And the electric scooters were they were everywhere.
Yeah, great public transport system, easy to navigate once we got onto Yandex Maps, which was the key app. All of this, we found that it's very easy to travel if you're a Russian speaker, and as a Western tourist, Yeah, and as a Western tourist, you have to just stretch over and find the apps, find the technology that can help you. That meant different maps, different navigation, different apps. Something that really helped us was
Google Lens and Google Translate. And Google Lens is amazing because, as well as identifying plants and doing other stuff, it also, if you scan it on a label that's in another language, then it just scans in and it knows the language, and then it just tells you what it is in whatever language you speak.
Yeah, we found it super useful and really needed it for immediate translation of menus, of notices, of signs.
Yeah.
It saved us money when we found out about 2-for-1 offers, didn't it? So that was incredibly helpful. And what we found was just there was an amazing sense from the younger generation of wanting to connect, of being friendly, wanting to practice English.
Yeah.
What did you find with the kids?
The kids were like, "Where are you from?" And they were like speaking very good English, and it was like very nice.
In the playground. Yeah, we found that older people were much more likely to not know English, but as soon as you got to the younger generations, people wanted to practice English. They wanted to know where we were from. And generally we would have to say, "Do you speak English?" That was the first thing we had to ask, wasn't it? And then people would go away and find someone that did, and there would always be someone in the vicinity. But we found a real sense of wanting to connect and learn and be part of the wider world and connect into English speaking culture and language, didn't we?
Yeah.
So we felt extremely welcome. People gave us all sorts of help, tips, things for free to welcome us.
Then, one more question. What answer? This place is the 10th largest country in the world, and it's very big. It even has 2 time zones, and it feels like Eurasia.
Yeah, it's Central Asia and very much at the crossroads between Europe and Asia, but it feels like very accessible for somebody traveling from Europe. And I think that's what we really want to communicate, isn't it? Because it's not so known. If you can just get over you can make the reach across the language divide and use all these tools and apps and technology that can help, then you really can feel very comfortable traveling and getting to know this country, which is extremely friendly and absolutely beautiful. As Lucia said, massive. Really surprising how unknown it is for Britain when it's so big and so keen to connect to us.
Yeah, one more thing about the sleeper train. When you look around, it's just like cozy and nice, and the guards are just like really friendly, and they make sure we're comfortable. Like, it's just going around being like, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need something?" like that.
Yeah, talking of tips and tricks, the only way I was able to purchase this ticket was through RussianRailways.com. I tried lots of things, including directly with Kazakhstan trains, but it was all quite difficult to navigate until I found RussianRailways.com, and they really helped with both trains in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Really easy to do international payments and to receive the ticket, etc. And that has worked like a dream. We know it as the Silk Road, and there's lots of coverage of its traditional role as the meeting point between Europe and Asia and the trading routes that came through it and how important these places were. But we really recommend it as a place of today to visit. And honestly, for me, so far, it's been the absolute highlight of our trip. And I hope to come back one day. So on to Uzbekistan, and Uzbekistan is a real place where you get the sense of an incredibly significant country that has been at the center of empires and ages and has an incredible history that is building on straight away, just in terms of architecture, design, even proportion of Tashkent, the capital. You feel like it's very much a place that has an incredibly rich history, culture, and place in the world, and is building ambitiously on that for the future. My trip was very much a mix of the modern and the ancient. We spent time in Tashkent, capital Tashkent, and I attended the World Conference on Creative Economy. Tashkent is an enormous city with incredibly large proportions. The roads, are enormous. The distances between places are enormous. And the conference was extremely impressive. It was held at a new conference centre, and the level and quality of the design, the branding, the marketing, and particularly the design of the conference centre and the way that it was decorated for the conference with all these screens with visual arts and sculptures was absolutely beautiful and really impressive. And it was exciting to hear Uzbekistan showcasing what they're doing to other countries in terms of supporting their creative economy. 20 million out of a 39 million population are younger people. And so, like with many other parts of the world, and like I've made this comment before, you really have this feeling of like a young, vibrant population pushing for opportunities and aspirations, and governments really trying to respond to that. And so we had some really exciting things about some flagship programs that the Uzbekistan government are doing, where they're using both in the publishing industry, but also videos, cartoons, audio. They're building on their ancient history, their stories, their cities, their well-known historical famous people, and they're using them and bringing them into the modern age in terms of leveraging AI and leveraging the creative industries to communicate those and using them as creative inspiration. And that was extremely exciting. It was really fun listening to other countries and regions who had also come to the conference, relating into Uzbekistan, and just understanding the consistent thread of my trip was just seeing how many links this region has to so many other different parts of the world, and because of its very central location and because of its different history. And so the Gulf countries were very much tracing their own history and their great cities and connecting them to the cities here in Central Asia, and also talking about modernity, but teaching their population about their culture and their history and their traditional sports and animals and way of life. And it related very strongly to Uzbekistan, and you could see a real shared understanding of that importance as we move forward in the modern world. In a completely different way, I saw a lot of links with, for example, Korea. There was a large mass deportation of the Korean community to Central Asia under the Soviet era, and many of that population stayed. And then there's been a real effort to bring that into shared partnerships, shared connections, and shared projects. And so almost from east to west, you can see those links in the same way. The Russian link is still very visible in terms of the Russian language and the apps and the systems that are used, are often Russian inspired or just Russian systems that are used in other Russian speaking countries. And you can also see there's also a vying between the Uzbek language and the Russian language, and they're both used quite a lot and quite interchangeably, and depending on who is talking. And so that was one of my biggest takeaways from Uzbekistan, was just this amazing layering of different reference points. And I guess that's what happens when you are a traveler. You look for your own reference points and how to understand a place. And I could just see this incredible mix of Islamic culture, design, approach, and obviously religion, but also the historical great Islamic age is very present in Uzbekistan. On the other hand, with the functioning of things, often with the Russian language and the modern technology. And food, if you're coming from Europe and looking to understand the food, you would look more to Turkey. So the food was kind of rice, like lots of meat, kebabs, bread. Yeah, and then of course you feel that visibly you would locate the way that the majority of people look is similar to Asia, and also very visible links with Asian countries connecting in. And so it was a real blend of many different things, with a huge boldness and confidence of who Uzbekistan is because of its incredibly significant and grand place in history. From the modern side of things, my kids were here. My husband joined us for this bit of the trip, and we discovered that Tashkent, the capital, is absolutely incredible for kids. It has these wonderful, what can are very difficult to describe. They're a mixture between adventure, kind of Disney like magical destinations, parks. One particular is called Magic City, very popular place to go in the evening, very magical with all these different lights over a lake, but then with shops, free to enter, shops, restaurants, zip line, different rides, and just a real place that people are in enjoying themselves. We spent various evenings there having an incredible time. Likewise, there was Dream City, which was more of like of a park amongst trees with different rides, and again these beautiful lights. Everything was extremely cheap, and so my kids could go on every ride they wanted to, which was amazing. And so that was a really nice surprise. It was also lucky that my husband was with us because it was a country that's a little bit more of a stretch in terms of traveling. It's not easy necessarily to travel, but it is definitely doable. Part of that was just because we couldn't get into the Yandex taxi app, which is the Russian taxi app. I think some other international travelers have been able to, but that means that we couldn't take cabs. So we had to use public transport all the time, which also had its upsides. People weren't that used to seeing tourists on public transport, and we got approached by all sorts of people that were keen, like in Kazakhstan, learning English, keen to speak English, keen to practice. We had troubles with our international eSIM not working all the time, and so we often ended up sort of with the old-fashioned snapshots of maps trying to work out where we were. And so, yeah, because of the Russian and because things work just in a different system to the way that European systems work, you had to take your time and you had to take deep breaths every so often. But it was definitely doable. We had a brilliant Airbnb in Tashkent, and interestingly, it was similar to Almaty in that it was the one we had got in Almaty. It was in an apartment block on a very modern estate, beautifully designed with its gardens and children's parks, shops, and a real community feel about it. And that was interesting that we had the similar experience across the two countries and could really see that this is a very effective modern way of growing their cities. And then we went from Tashkent, the big modern city where we'd got a real idea of Uzbekistan in the modern world. We then went to Samarkand. And Samarkand is one of the ancient cities. It's actually the second biggest city in Uzbekistan, I think. So it's very significant in its own right, but it boasts the incredible history of the Silk Road and being the center of empires, and it's very much on the tourist route. So you did get that feel as you went to it that there were lots of people sort of being marched through to see different things. But we stayed in an amazing Airbnb with a local family, where a local family really looked after us. And we saw what is definitely considered the most awesome site in Central Asia. And when you get there, you can see why. It hosts the pin-up place of Central Asia, which you see in a lot of photos if you look into the region. The most incredible public square built in the late 14th century and the heart of the Timurid Empire. And it's basically a set of buildings which include these large gate kind of portals, mosques, madrasas, the Islamic schools with their beautiful arches. And it was such a delight being at that monument. And one of the amazing things about it was that rather than being a place that you just get kind of marched through and can see once, it's got these beautiful steps that sit opposite it, and all sorts of people just hang out on those steps. It's a real destination in itself, and local people and visitors alike are there eating ice cream, having food, people selling balloons, and you can see this absolutely stunningly beautiful architecture, and you can see it at different times of the day. And that's one of the most impressive things about it, is it's so beautiful because of its colours. And so we saw it as the sun set, and it was all very much oranges and pinks and turquoise and just incredibly breathtaking. And we went back at 8 o'clock to see every night there's a sound and light show. And so there was music and bright colours lighting up the different architecture, which was so much fun to see and really breathtaking. And then we saw it the next day in the bright sun, and there you can't hardly see any of the orange and the pinks you saw the previous day, and it's much more kind of blues and greens. And so it's a place that really creates a feeling of well-being and awe and wonder, and that you can really, really enjoy yourself in. So we really appreciated that, and we saw a couple of the other big sites as well in Samarkand. And when you sit there, of course, it's just so useful to be in the heart of somewhere that was so different at that point to how Europe was. Feel incredibly impressed at how stunning and advanced and impressive it was at that time. And, you know, the comparisons with Europe and what was happening at that time, it feels very incomparable. You get a real sense of where the progress and advances of ideas and innovation were being made at that time. And also you get a much better understanding, I think, of how different empires crossed each other, fell, as you read the history, the Great Islamic Age, and then there in Uzbekistan, and then understanding the influence of China and the roots that came from there, then the significance of the Mongol Empire taking over and then how that changed the world. I'm not a history expert, but I think that sometimes being in these places can just cement some of the understanding that you have of history. And what I absolutely love understanding is where a country sees itself because of its history. And that's my biggest impression and takeaway of Uzbekistan is Uzbekistan had this grand place in history. And what's amazing about that is it can leverage that now for the future, that confidence and sense of identity, but also the historical links that it has with all parts of the world that it exists in between and around it. And I feel very excited about this region. That's my biggest takeaway as I come away from it, is I feel excited for this region and the future, because it is so able to seamlessly relate into various cultures in Asia, into the Arab world, into Russian speaking and similar countries that have a part of their history related to Russia, and more culturally into various different countries that surround it, then it's really well situated and well placed to actually to be a convener, to be a connector, to be a bridge, and to be a collaborator on new projects and programs. And I'm excited about watching what the region does as it also invests in its young population speaking English, its connections with the wider world, its connections with Europe and the US. So these are notes from a quick visit to the UAE and a day trip to Oman. I'm very aware of how sad and difficult the situation is in the Middle East at the moment, and we were actually due to go to Jordan and we had to cancel. But this is a quick perspective on what I learned staying with friends in the UAE, and we're so grateful to them hosting us and showing us a little bit more of what life is like in the UAE beyond what the normal connotations are of Dubai. My biggest basic learning has been around how the UAE is made up of 7 emirates, and one of those is Dubai and another is Abu Dhabi, and they're obviously the most famous. But this is a country that was, as my friend is really good at telling people, it's a very new country. These 7 emirates came together in the 70s, and they are forging a future together, but they are also their own unique places. Each one of them has a sheikh and has their own plan for their emirate. And we were in Ras Al Khaimah, which is an emirate. It takes about an hour and a half to get into Dubai from Ras Al Khaimah. And it's a place that people choose to live in if they want a quieter life and perhaps more integrated with the Emirati community, a place that people are increasingly interested in living in. What's fascinating and very unique about the UAE is that only 10% of its population are Emiratis, and they are very well taken care of by their government. And so the whole plan of the country is that they invited many people in to work and to build their country up, and 90% of the population is made up of other nationalities. The Emirati, the 10% of the population who are Emirati are really well taken care of by the state. They all receive a state salary, they receive land to say that they're wealthy, they're well off, they're taken care of. And so it's actually a really interesting model that I don't think is known that much about. And then outside of that, the 90% of the population that are here to work in different sectors, come from different countries. There are a large number of South Asians, obviously a large Filipino population, various European expats, and those people are here, invited here to work and to help build the country. And therefore, the systems work all around that, which means there's some really interesting facts about it. Like there's very little crime in the UAE, and that's because if somebody commits a crime, then they have to leave the country. And the local Emirati population is extremely well taken care of and provided for. And therefore, it is a society that exists with very little crime. It also means that all the processes are straightforward and pretty effective. From what sounds like it, you have to learn what they are, but they work in order to facilitate people being able to live and work in the UAE. When you retire, you have to leave. And so it really is a working population that fill the country. We really enjoy seeing the camels in the desert, going out on boats to the sea, getting a sense of what life is like. So going to malls, we enjoyed going into Dubai and going to the big Dubai mall with its massive aquarium, and also going into the center of Dubai, going to the old town with the markets, and going on the river taxi at sunset. That was a absolute highlight, crossing from one side of the river to the other on these traditional boats. And then we had an incredible time going to Oman for one day. You can get to Oman very easily from Ras Al Khaimah, where we were, to an area called Masandam, and you can take a boat, a traditional boat, and go and see dolphins and go snorkeling. And it goes into these little coves. It goes out into the sea and then back into these kind of fjords that go between these tiny villages. It's very rocky, it's very austere. It's very difficult for life to live in those conditions. I think only goats survive. Great towering kind of rocky areas, but you can get to them by boats, and there's these little villages where the government very impressively has got power. The villages, they're old fishing communities, and they live part-time there and part-time in the bigger town, but are provided for in terms of schooling. And interestingly, I had a really interesting conversation with the person working on the boat, who was Omani, who actually talked about there being changes happening in Oman, like there's a relaxing of some of the rules, and he was really enthusiastic about the growth of opportunities for the people that live in that area and for him and his family. And he felt like people were now able to get better jobs and different type of jobs, and they were being given access to training for those jobs. And so I stood on a boat in flat water with these great rocks rising around us, having just seen dolphins going along by our boat, and my kids absolutely loved that, as did I. And I thought, wow, it's just again an example of, in many places in the world, it feels like things are on the move and it feels like there are more opportunities. And I want us to be able to do that in the UK, that's what things feel like in many places. And although there is also a more concerning and difficult geopolitical picture, there is also a lot of excitement and progress in different places, and we should capture that and be inspired by that for us in our own country. And so that's a whiz-stop tour from the UAE: desert, dolphins, malls, a breakfast at our host Emirati friends, which was absolutely delicious and so interesting, and just dipping our toe into a very unique but essential country in the Gulf, and now on further across the world. Thank you for listening to the Great British Foreign Affairs podcast, where Britain meets the world. Subscribe today, share it with a friend or colleague, and be part of shaping Britain's role on the global stage.